Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Washington Gun Law TV. I'm Washington Gun Law President William Kirk. Thanks for joining us. Hey, what we discuss all the time on this channel is all the attempts by the federal and the state government, and private entities for that matter, to achieve their ultimate goal of civilian disarmament. Now, this particular presidential administration has been giving us a lot to talk about, with executive action after executive action after executive action, usually done through the purview of the ATF. But it appears that this president, probably desperate to gain support for his reelection, is about to take a much larger step. It's to create a whole new government agency, and you're going to love who's getting invited to the table there. So today, let's spend a few minutes and let's talk about the president's new Ministry of Disarmament. Okay, so this is what we're talking about. Story originally broke in the Washington Post. The president is now going to be setting up a whole new federal select committee called the Federal Office of Gun Violence Prevention. Okay, so a whole new federal agency will be created now to prevent gun violence. Now, we could go on and on and on about gun violence and whether it's just really violence, which it is. And we don't talk about car violence when we have drunk drivers out there on the road killing people. We actually talk about drunk driving. But for some reason, whenever a gun's involved, we're going to focus on the inanimate object and not the maniac who is standing behind the trigger. Now, if you think that this is going to be some sort of an office that looks at all sorts of comprehensive data to really come up with how can we prevent some of the violence problems that we clearly have in this country, well, you're kidding yourself, because that's not. Don't believe me? Here who is being selected immediately to this new crack committee and office of the president. That includes Stephanie Feldman. She is the director of the Domestic Policy Council, again, another organization which routinely advocates for civilian disarmament. Okay, also appointed to it is Greg Jackson. He's the director of the Community Justice Action Fund. Had an opportunity to take a look at that organization. Yeah, they do talk about more comprehensive plans to reducing violence in the United States. They certainly do focus on issues involving racial minorities. But yes, they are big fans of your more traditional gun control or civilian disarmament measures. And then, of course, there's Rob Wilcox, who is the Senior Director of Governmental Affairs for Everytown for Gun Safety. So those are the first three people that the president is naming to his new Federal Office of Gun Violence Prevention. Now, you know things are bad when folks over at, for example, Giffords start clamoring for what the president is doing. Take, for example, what Peter Ambler, director over at Giffords, had to say about this. A White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention would build on the already tremendous record of President Biden and Vice President Harris on gun safety. This has been a top priority of ours for years, and it would provide an important center of gravity for leadership across the administration as the president and vice president implement the historic Bipartisan Safer Communities Act and continue to push Congress to pass legislation to save lives. The hiring of Greg and Rob would show how seriously this administration takes its responsibility to address this crisis. Now, supporters of this plan, of course, say that this will be a far more effective way to disarm you. It also, and this is kind of humorous, some believe that this will give the vice president an opportunity to really show some true leadership on this. And I can assure each and every one out of you, it's going to take a lot more than a committee to allow the vice president to demonstrate competency really in anything. What's happening here is that President Biden, when running for election, made a lot of very bold and brash promises to a lot of special interest groups. And he basically promised to disarm all of you, the lawful and responsible gun-owning American. Now, unfortunately for the president, The Congress has shown an unwillingness to pass major gun control legislation, perhaps because they respect the Constitution, or perhaps because this president has been so wholly ineffective in everything that he's attempted to do that he has absolutely no clout to get any federal legislation done. So what has he done instead? Well, what he's done is he has turned the ATF loose, not once, not twice, but 3 separate times now with new rule-making order. He's essentially trying to take matters into his own hands. And what he needs here is he needs to score some major political points with the voting bloc that wants nothing but absolute civilian disarmament. And so the creation of this office is a step towards achieving that goal. Now, whether or not we're going to see any kind of major policy come from here, who knows? Are we going to see a massive amount of rhetoric come from this? That's the exact reason that it's being created. It is being created for the rhetoric so that the president can score brownie points with certain bases. Whether or not we're going to actually see legislation or any type of concerted effort other than just group speak coming from this organization, that remains to be seen. But we do have to carefully watch this because this is yet another tool that's being put in the toolbox to disarm all of you throughout the nation. Once again, it's going to be the Federal Office of Gun Violence Prevention, and we're going to call it the Ministry of Civilian Disarmament. Listen, you may have more questions about this or anything else related to what's left of our Second Amendment rights. Now, you should know how to get a hold of Washington gun law by now, but if you don't, that's okay. That information's right down there in the description box. Now, in the meantime, let's everyone remember that part of being the lawful and responsible gun owner, like we talk about all the time here, is to know what the law is in every situation and how it applies to you in any instance that you may find yourself. Until next time, thanks for watching and stay safe.